Good morning. This is an open meeting of the United States Securities and Exchange Commission on October 26, 2011. Today, the Commission will consider adoption of a joint SEC-CFTC form to collect critical systemic risk data about hedge funds and other private funds. This data will assist the Financial Stability Oversight Council in assessing the systemic risk that these funds may pose. This private fund data collection is mandated by the Dodd-Frank Act. The data collection form we are adopting today, termed Form PF for Private Fund, was the result of extensive and collaborative consultation with our fellow FSOC members, as well as coordination with international regulators. As a result, we have produced a document that will address the dramatic lack of private fund information available to regulators today, while easing the burden on private fund managers producing the data, so that the same data collection approaches and protocols apply across borders where appropriate. This private fund data collection initiative follows from the lessons learned during the financial crisis, lessons about the importance of monitoring and reducing the possibility that a sudden shock or failure of a financial institution will cascade through the entire financial system. The Dodd-Frank Act sought to address this issue in part by creating the FSOC to carry out this monitoring role and by requiring the SEC to collect information from private fund advisors to inform the Council in its risk assessment of systemic risk. Form PF data will give the FSOC new insight into private fund activities and greatly enhance the FSOC's risk monitoring mission. Form PF data will be utilized by regulators to assess systemic risk. It will be complemented by the new Form ADV data about private funds, which provides both regulators and the investing public with information about a private fund's size, its managers, and the entities that serve critical gatekeeper functions, such as auditors and custodians. For hedge funds, private equity funds, and liquidity funds, the information required on Form PF would be tiered so that we would receive more detailed information from larger private fund advisors rather than imposing the same reporting requirements for all private funds. In addition, in a change from the proposal, we are adopting a minimum reporting requirement of $150 million so that a smaller private fund advisor would not be required to file Form PF at all, in part because these smaller advisors would have a minimal impact on a broad-based systemic risk analysis. While the group of large private fund advisors is relatively small in number, it represents a large majority of private funds' assets under management. For instance, the rule would require heightened reporting from hedge fund advisors managing at least $1.5 billion in hedge fund assets. And although this heightened reporting threshold would apply to only about 230 U.S.-based hedge fund advisors, these advisors manage more than an estimated 80% of the assets under management. Similarly, SEC staff estimates that approximately 155 U.S.-based private equity fund advisors managing over $2 billion in private equity fund assets would be subject to the heightened private equity reporting. In response to commenters, we have increased the private equity fund manager thresholds to target those advisors that have the most influence over the private equity market. At the same time, however, we believe that we still will receive heightened reporting from managers representing 75% of the private equity market. This will provide FSOC members the information they need to monitor the leveraged loan and private equity markets. In addition, in general, the data collection form will require substantially less information from advisors managing large private equity funds than from the large hedge fund and liquidity fund advisors. This is because after consultation with staff representing FSOC members, we believe private equity funds have less potential to pose systemic risks than other types of private funds. The private fund data collection we are implementing will play an important role in supporting the framework created by the Dodd-Frank Act. It is designed to ensure that regulators have a view into financial market activities of potential systemic importance. At the same time, however, and in consultation with FSOC, we are making several changes at adoption that we believe address issues raised by commenters while still preserving the utility of the data collection for the FSOC. The strongest concerns voiced on the proposal related to the timing and frequency of the reporting. We want the information that will be reported to regulators on Form PF to be useful. It will not be useful if it is rushed or incomplete. As a result, we are extending the filing deadline from 15 days to 60 days for larger hedge fund advisors. In addition, for smaller advisors and for large private equity advisors, we are extending the deadlines from 90 days to 120 days. We believe data quality will improve and reporting burden will decrease with these changes, but FSOC will still obtain sufficiently timely information. The deadline for private equity fund advisors is designed to allow those advisors to obtain financial information and statements from their fund's portfolio companies. In addition, unlike the proposal, large private equity fund advisors will only file Form PF once a year, as opposed to the quarterly requirement for large hedge fund and liquidity fund managers. In consultation with FSOC staff, we are adopting this reduced filing frequency for private equity managers because the private equity business model is based on purchasing a select group of companies and working with management to strengthen them over time. Thus, trends emerge more slowly in private equity investing. In addition, we took heed of comments related to the costs that attach to reclassifying, recalculating, or reprogramming data and systems for reporting purposes. In fine-tuning Form PF, we have balanced the usefulness that comes from standardization of data reporting, where necessary, with the benefit of relying on advisors' own internal calculation methodologies where appropriate. I also know that the confidentiality of the information reported on Form PF is very important to those who are filing the information. The data is sensitive and proprietary and, by congressional design, non-public. The Dodd-Frank Act contains strong protection for the information filed on Form PF. But in addition, we are committed at the SEC to building the controls necessary to provide appropriate confidentiality and limit the availability of proprietary hedge fund and other private fund information to those who have a regulatory need to know. Before hearing more details from the staff, I'd like to thank those who worked so hard to put this proposal together. Within the SEC, this rulemaking was led by the exceptionally bright and capable team of Sarah Ten-Saitoff and David Bartels, along with Eileen Rominger, Bob Plays, Keith Canyon, Alpha Patel, and Parisa Hogshanas from the Division of Investment Management. They were assisted by others from across the agency, including Greg Berman from the Division of Trading and Markets, from the Division of Risk, Strategy, and Financial Innovation, Craig Lewis, Harvey Westbrook, Chris Arnold, and Matthew Kozora. From the Office of the General Counsel, Mark Kahn, Meredith Mitchell, Lori Price, and Jill Felker. From the Office of Compliance, Inspections, and Examinations, Jim Reese. From the Enforcement Division, Bob Kaplan, Bruce Carpati, Brian Fitzpatrick, and Igor Rosenblit. And from the Office of International Affairs, Troy Beatty. And now I will turn it over to Eileen Rominger to tell us more about the staff's recommendation.